You are listening to Mining Stock Education, where you'll learn from the top leaders in the natural resource sector and uncover quality mining investment opportunities.
Yes, we have announced a new investment, strategic equity investment with Sumitomo Metal Mining. Sumitomo is the largest mining and processing company in Japan. They are, first of all, well experienced. They're one of the leading and largest nickel producers in the world, and also a group that is very familiar with making partnership or joint venture investments with Western mining companies. They have joint ventures with Teck Resources and Freeport-McMoRan, Lundin Mining, among others. And so for us, this represents a major validation of a project. And we're just super excited to be working with Japan's leading mining group on this.
Welcome back to MSE. I'm your host, Bill Powers, checking in today with Martin Turenne. He's the president, CEO, and director of FPX Nickel, one of our longtime multi-year sponsors. Welcome back onto the show, Martin, and Happy New Year. Well, it seems like every other time I bring you on, you have a new corporate investor. So you've done it again. You finance the company outside of Bay Street or House Street, which is actually a good thing for retail investors such as myself. Could you break down the current financing and the new corporate partner?
Yeah, thanks, Bill, for having us on, and happy 2024 to you and your listeners. So it starts off as a good year for us. Yes, we have announced a new investment, strategic equity investment with Sumitomo Metal Mining. Sumitomo is the largest mining and processing company in Japan. They are, first of all, well experienced. They're one of the leading and largest nickel producers in the world, and also a group that is very familiar with making partnership or joint venture investments with Western mining companies. They have joint ventures with Teck Resources and Freeport-McMoRan, Lundin Mining, among others. And so for us, this represents a major validation of a project. And we're just super excited to be working with Japan's leading mining group on this.
So can you remind us of all the corporates you now have on the stock? Because I might not even be able to pull them all off the top of my head. You've brought in so many in the last year.
Yeah, it has been really important for us to signal the technical, economic, and permitting viability of the project by bringing on strategic investors over the last 14 months or so. And we hope that with each of those, it becomes more apparent that the project is robust in every sense. First of all, about 14 months ago, we took on our first strategic investor who owns 9.9% of the company. We've yet to identify the nature of that group. We can say it is a large public company and a group that is very supportive of our work. They came in at a 27% premium in late 2022. Then in mid-2020, 2023, we took on another equity investment from Outokumpu. This is a Finnish company, a European company. It's the largest stainless steel company in Europe. Again, they own about 9.9% of the company, and their investment came in at a 40% premium to our market price when we did that offering. Now with Sumitomo, that adds the third major corporate strategic investor. And again, I think the takeaway should be, one, they're investing at a significant premium, this time a 70% premium to market, which is what you don't often see that for a simple private placement. And secondly, it just adds another leg to the stool, so to speak, of support from a major sophisticated investor in the nickel space, looking at our Baptiste project and saying that this is a project that they need to be involved in.
And don't you have partnerships with Toyota and Panasonic, if I recall, too?
That's correct. So Toyota and Panasonic's joint venture battery company, which is called Prime Planet Energy and Solutions, or PPES. We have signed a collaboration framework agreement with them that was announced in September of last year, and it sets the framework for potential upstream investment by PPES, where they would potentially make an upstream investment within FPX or within our Baptiste project, again with the ultimate goal of securing nickel units, which they very much need for their battery plant, which they're currently constructing in North Carolina, and more generally for their growth ambitions in North America generally.
So JOCMEC is also a partner, which is essentially the Japanese government for your exploration of Awaruite deposits worldwide. What's the connection with Japan in terms of the partnerships? Is there something unique there? You mentioned a Finnish company in Europe also that's invested, but is there something unique with Japan in this deposit?
Well, Japan, I think you have to, just as a general comment, of course, is very well experienced in making outbound investments. Japan is not hugely well endowed from the standpoint of natural resources. And so for many generations now, Japan has been looking outward to make investments, to partner oftentimes with Western companies to secure a supply of important raw materials for the Japanese economy. So that's the historical backdrop, and there's a long history of that. With respect to nickel specifically, Japan has experience in Indonesia, it has experience in the Philippines, which are two of the largest producing countries in the world. But those are countries where China has taken sort of a dominant position in the supply chain. And so yes, Indonesia and Philippines produce a lot of nickel, but it's not necessarily always available for Japanese interests, or doesn't have the ESG profile that they really need in order to kind of fulfill the ESG ambitions that they have for their downstream supply chain needs, whether in stainless steel or in electric vehicle batteries. So they, by looking at us, by looking at Canada, I think they're really reaffirming that geopolitical alignment between Japan and Canada. That's quite important. That was formalized in an agreement between the two countries announced earlier in 2023 for collaboration on securing raw materials. So in this particular cycle, this is the first time that Sumitomo is making an investment in a nickel company or a nickel project. And that's particularly important. And I think it really points people to the fact that, yes, there's a lot of nickel coming out of Indonesia, but the rest of the world needs to start building new nickel supply as well in order to diversify that supply chain away from those Chinese. And in the case of Russia, also Russian geopolitical interests, and Russia also being a large nickel producer. So Canada and Australia and other countries that are traditional nickel powerhouses will continue to see that investment on that theme.
So the novelty, obviously, of the Awaruite deposit, that didn't scare any of these corporates off. That would actually is what attracted them.
You're exactly right. It's quite the opposite of scaring them off. So as you mentioned, our deposit is unconventional. It's not a typical nickel sulfide that you would typically find in Canada. The nickel is hosted in a mineral called Awaruite, as you mentioned, which is a nickel iron alloy. And I think these groups recognize, as we have long recognized, that this different type of nickel mineral has distinct processing advantages that can lead to a lower environmental footprint, higher recoveries, and producing a higher value product that goes through fewer processing steps, from nickel being in the ground to nickel finally sitting in an EV battery or in a piece of stainless steel. So those processing advantages, I think, are being viewed decisively as such on the basis of the test work that we've done over time. We know we still get a lot of questions from retail investors or institutional investors about this newfangled mineral. You just simply have to look at the endorsement of Sumitomo, of Outokumpu, and of the Toyota and Panasonic joint venture company, who see that this is a disruptive new source of nickel supply for the market. We're quite excited about that.
Your Baptiste deposit is in the Dakar Nickel District in British Columbia, and this is the ancestral land of many First Nations. You did have to address in a press release last year that there was a certain group within the multiple First Nations group that was concerned about future exploitation of the resource. Was that a concern to these corporates, and most recently Sumitomo coming in? Point one. Point two is, I do pay attention to what's being said on the internet, and there were some talk of perhaps in the chat rooms, and I don't know if this is true, of some organizing, let's say, to maybe formalize the displeasure with FPX a little more. Could you address that as well?
Yeah. So, on the second point, we can't really comment on what's out there on the message boards as it regards, speculation about what's going on within these particular nations. It's not our business to enter into the internal governance dynamics of these nations. And so we won't comment on that specifically. With respect to the investment by Sumitomo and, the other two large strategic investors that we have, they evaluate every aspect of this project, of course, before making an investment decision. They evaluate management, they evaluate the project itself from a technical feasibility standpoint, an economic feasibility standpoint, from the standpoint of kind of the permittability of the project. And so the fact that Sumitomo has gone ahead and made this investment, I think, is a strong sign in that regard in every respect. The project is not yet in the environmental assessment or permitting phase. We hope to potentially enter that EA phase later this year or potentially into 2025. that's going to be the ideal forum for all rights holders here, including all of the impacted First Nations, to work collaboratively with FPX and with the provincial government of BC and the federal government of Canada to fully evaluate the project, to understand its potential impacts and benefits, and to really work collaboratively to develop the mine project in a way that is based on a kind of a true 21st century approach. That is one where rights holders are full project participants and partners, where they have a real say in how the project is developed. We're fully committed to that. We're fully committed to the principles of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The concept of free, prior, and informed consent really rests at the heart of what we do as a company. It always has, and it will continue to do so go forward. And we're confident in our ability to bring all of these rights holders together and work with them in a continued respectful manner, and to really address all the concerns that can be raised throughout the process head on. And we have, I think, some innovative ideas about how best to work together and how to ensure that those environmental considerations and those cultural considerations are placed at the paramount of how we develop this project.
You've had success at the Van target, which is distinct from the Baptiste deposit. What role did the Van target play in valuing the company when you were chatting with Sumitomo about their investment?
Yeah, I mean, the Baptiste deposit on its own, which is, of course, the main sort of flagship, we produced a preliminary feasibility study on that last year that outlines a almost 30-year mine life. The Van target really speaks to the sort of the regional upside and the regional exploration potential. We've done enough drilling there at Van already to know that, the size of the prize there is potentially to the same scale of Baptiste, if not larger. And so companies like Sumitomo and other large interests who are looking at planning their business not on the quarter-to-quarter or even a year-to-year basis, but decade-to-decade, generation-to-generation, I think they very clearly see, and that's something that's come back in all of the sort of major due diligence processes that we've had over the course of the last couple of years, is all of those counterparties have seen the upside here from a geological and exploration standpoint to ultimately support a multi-generational nickel mining district. And so that absolutely factors into the investment decisions here. I think, retail and institutional investors can get caught up in the day-to-day of the nickel price being up or down, or what's happening in nickel production coming out of places like Indonesia. But securing a stable source of nickel from Canada, low carbon, low cost nickel over multiple decades and generations from a strategic standpoint. I mean, the value of that, I think, should be obvious to people. I don't think it always is reflected in the share price adequately, though.
What is the treasury at now with this investment?
So this investment brings the treasury to around 42 million Canadian dollars. So we're fully funded now for 2024 and 2025. And so, again, we've been able to do these financings at premiums to restore the treasury, to kind of stay ahead of the game in terms of the financing cycle. Quite excited about that. It's also worth noting that, the existing strategic investors do have a participation right. They have the ability to maintain their interest in FPX on the basis of the Sumitomo financing by participating in a top-up round. And we'll see what their interests are here to potentially do so here in the coming weeks.
Martin, I always like to ask CEOs not only why their share price would go up, but why their share price isn't up already. So as you do your own analysis of why you believe you have a depressed share price, can you share that with listeners, please? Yeah,
it's something we think about, every day. Of course, we're always focused first and foremost, I think, in managers of the company as to what's in the best long-term interests of the development of the project and of creating shareholder value on a long-term basis, not just simply being focused on day-to-day price movement. But at the same time, we also maintain that parallel interest in looking at the share price from day to day. And obviously we've had, a rough sort of 6 month period really coinciding with the announcement around that public disclosure from one of our partner First Nations expressing some opposition to the project in summer of 2023. I would just, standing back, I'd look at three broad things that have led to sort of decline in share price over the last 6 month period. One, just being caught up in generally continued difficult markets for junior mining equities. Two, the nickel price has declined about 50% over the last year. That's obviously a tough sort of macro headwind to be developing a nickel company in terms of how let's say, whether the nickel is in favor or not. And certainly from the standpoint of financial investors, it is not, though we do see the opposite view really expressed by those strategic investors. And thirdly has been that, the questions around the permittability of the project in light of the expressed First Nation opposition. Again, there are multiple First Nations who are impacted by this project. We're working collaboratively with all of them. We well recognize some of the sensitivities that have been expressed to us, and we're very committed to working forward with all of the nations, some of whom we have very strong public relationships with, to move that forward. And as I think we're able to continue to create more clarity around the nature of those relationships and the nature of the various community views around the project, that will serve to give some comfort to our investors. And, there's nothing more important in that regard than just demonstrating that we continue to advance the project, and we certainly continue to do that. I think investors should take heart of that for sure.
From a retail investor standpoint, could there be any drawbacks to bringing in too many corporate investors? So I've been told by some CEOs that the institutional investors or corporate investors, they can, bail you out when retail's not there. But if anything happens with them, they can also cause challenges for the company. What are your thoughts in this regard?
Well, I think institutional investors and strategic investors are two fundamentally different categories, right? Institutional investors are just fund managers. They're managing pools of capital. They can be just as flaky and flighty as retail, right? They can be love you one day and hate you the next. And if an institutional investor with a large position wants to sell, that can be hugely damaging to the share price. We have experienced that ourselves over the last few years, subsequent to a bought deal that we did on the street in 2021. So we know that well. The strategic investors, that's a different pool altogether. These are long-term, very, very sticky investors. In the case of Outokumpu and Sumitomo, part of their investment thesis here is to secure some rights of future offtake to nickel. Well, they can only maintain those rights if they maintain their shares. So if they ever sold a single share in FPX, then they would lose those offtake rights. So you can imagine that those groups would be very sticky and long-term. At the same time, the free float for FPX is probably in the region of 40 to 50% of the shares outstanding. There's no reason that we can't create, sufficient volume to create opportunities for retail to come in and out of the stock as they see fit. But I would say that, for FPX more specifically, there's always been questions about, this is a novel nickel deposit. It's a relatively low-grade nickel deposit. Like, those are things that are maybe a little bit scary to unsophisticated investors. Well, they should, I think, look at the multiple points of validation from those large, sophisticated strategic investors to say, you know what, if it's good enough for Outokumpu as one of the largest nickel consumers in the world, if it's good enough for Sumitomo as one of the largest nickel producers in the world, it's probably a pretty robust project, and it's something that I should maybe look at.
And you essentially, in terms of a potential buyer of the Baptiste deposit or FPX Nickel as an entire entity, you kind of now created some bidders or some competition within the company for buying out the company, didn't you, with everything you brought in?
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that Sumitomo is an ideal project partner for any, let's say, major Western mining company who would look for a partner on this. They're quite accustomed to taking large, 20 to 30% minority interests in large mining projects. Most recently on the probably most well publicized on the Tex QB2 copper mine in Chile, which is just ramping into full production now. And so if you're a Western mining company, you're looking at FPX as a potential acquisition opportunity. You also recognize that it's relatively, significant capital associated with the project. You might want to know, well, who can I potentially partner with? Or also, who is lined up there as potential customers for this nickel product? The work that we've done with Toyota and Panasonic from an EV battery side shows that side. The work and the investment we've gotten from Outokumpu shows there's, a large stainless steel company out there very eager to buy nickel units here. And so in a sense, the product is being put on a bit of a platter towards that ultimate acquisition event.
Mm-hmm. What's the plan for Van Target in 2024? Are you looking to advance that at all in addition to the Baptiste feasibility study?
No, our focus is really going to be on Baptiste probably in 2024. Van, we have a good sense of what we have there. There's a lot more drilling that could be done in future years to continue to expand that and to demonstrate whether it can be, larger or higher grade than Baptiste. That thesis, or that hypothesis rather, is still very much intact. What we've been a little bit disappointed by, though, is we've done 2 seasons of drilling at Van in previous years, made a major discovery, and then had significant step outs on that discovery in a subsequent year. And in both cases, it didn't really add a lot to value for shareholders in the very short term. So we know we've got something big brewing there, but at the same time, we recognize that in these market conditions, it's not always the best thing to be drilling. I think the best thing that we can be doing to be adding value for FPX shareholders is to de-risk the main project at Baptiste. To the extent that continues to get de-risked and demonstrated to the market, then the inherent value of Van can kind of rise to the surface more easily. And thereafter, I think drilling at Van to expand it would make a lot of sense.
What's the main thing you're trying to accomplish in the feasibility study at Baptiste, beyond the pre-feasibility, what you already put out there?
Yeah, it really is nothing more than just to kind of increasing confidence in all of the assumptions. I mean, these are, I don't know if you've leafed through the pre-feasibility study, Bill. It's,
I read your press release.
400 plus pages of engineering there. Narrowing the kind of the error bar, let's say, on cost estimation is huge. There's still a lot of opportunities, a lot of sort of trade-off studies to optimize various aspects of the project from a scale standpoint, from mine planning standpoint, from how we deal with waste and tailings, et cetera, et cetera. There's a heck of a lot of work that still needs to be done. But in the end, it really is just about narrowing and increasing the confidence level in the engineering. There's a massive, massive step up from a PEA to a PFS. I don't think that's very well recognized in the market in terms of engineering certainty. And similarly, a similarly massive upgrade in engineering certainty from PFS to feasibility study. These studies, a lot of people never read them. A lot of people don't have the background in engineering to know that you're not just kind of slapping a bunch of new letters on the same study. It is a massive undertaking each time you upgrade from one to the next. And so it shouldn't be lost on people the importance of that, particularly as it relates to due diligence efforts by potential investors or acquirers. The fact that we have a completed pre-feasibility study puts us in a different class, I think, from companies that only have PEAs on their project, owing to that greater engineering certainty. That's part of what speaks to the new investment here by Sumitomo as well.
And when do you expect to complete the feasibility?
We haven't guided the market yet on that. I think probably you would expect from us in the coming months. We'll be putting out more plans definitively about what we're doing in 2024 and how that feasibility study work kind of fits into that. We've already kicked off some of the early trade-off study work, but in terms of when we would complete that study, that's still a bit up in the air.
Did Sumitomo make you reveal the mystery corporate investor, the name of that corporate investor, in order to do this with you, or were you able to retain that close to the chest, that information?
No, that was not a condition of their investment here, and that's something where we do respect confidentiality.
Excellent. All right. So just recap for us. What are the next catalysts that investors should look for in the stock?
In the immediate term, we'll see, again, the confidential investor and another company who have the right to participate here. We'll see whether they take up that right or not. And so that could be news that could be coming here in the next couple of weeks. Beyond that, I think people would really look at a news release kind of summarizing what our plans are for advancing the project in 2024. We also, as you may recall, received some government funding from the federal government of Canada under the Critical Mineral Strategy last year for scaling up production of battery-grade nickel sulfate, which is the product that goes into the EV batteries. And there will be continued news on that here later in the first quarter as well. So really teeing up a release, I think, here over the next little while that would set out our 2024 plans with a bit more precision.
If you'd like more information about the company, go to fpxnickel.com. Ticker symbol on the venture in Toronto is FPX, and in the States, you can find it under the ticker FPOCF. Martin, thank you for this update. It's been many months. I appreciate you coming on the show and being a sponsor. And one more time, congratulations at doing another corporate financing at a very substantial premium to your trading share price. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks a lot, Bill.